Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
The McDonald's Snack Wrap is back. You brought it back. Ranch Snack Wrap. Spicy Snack Wrap. You broke the internet. For a snack. Snack Wrap is back. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in 1 convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
I turned to see a Jap racing across in front of the bunker, a sword flourished above his head. He was going like Jesse Owens, screaming his head off, right across my front. I just had sense enough to take a split second, traversing my aim with him before I fired. He gave a convulsive leap, and I felt a jolt of delight. I'd hit the bastard! And as he fell on all fours, a Highland officer with whom I'd played football dived on him from behind, slashing at his head with a kukri. Someone rounded the bunker, almost barging into me. It was Stanley, shouting, "Where? Where?" in that kind of mad scramble. All that matters is seeing the enemy. He had a Bren magazine in one hand and was trying to change it for the one on the gun. I grabbed the barrel to steady it, burned myself, yelped, and seized the folded legs while he pushed the full magazine home. One of his putties was coming loose. A yard away, Gale was lying dead with 2 men bending over him. The whole wood was echoing with shots and explosions and yelling voices. Stanley ran past me, dropping the empty magazine, and as some Presbyterian devil made me pick it up, I noticed Gale's hat lying in the bunker doorway, and the little sergeant was shouting and running towards the second bunker. And that is George MacDonald Fraser describing 60 seconds of the McTeela battle in his amazing memoir, Quartered Safe Out Here.
And yes, I would recommend that book to anybody who wants to know what the war was like in Burma from the point of view of an incredibly articulate and a brilliantly vivid writer, who, of course, then went on to write the Flashman books with a slightly different view on the British in the empire and history. Anyway, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, and welcome to our 4th episode of Burma 45. Jim, what we've done, as ever with these sort of series, is we found that we'd tried to get too much done, but in the episodes we had planned. But that's largely because there are lots of moving parts. This is a hugely complicated scenario. And more importantly, having laid out one plan, that plan then doesn't go according to plan. It goes better than according to plan. So the plan has to be altered for a new plan that replaces the old plan that isn't the plan that ends up being the plan.
I think that's about right.
Yeah, in case anyone missed the last few episodes, there it is.
The thing with this is that, it is complex, and it's also got lots of strange names that we're unfamiliar with and places that we're unfamiliar with. So we don't, when you're sort of talking about Normandy, one has a kind of sort of mental map of more Normandy and what it looks like. You can sort of imagine where Caen is and Saint-Lô and Bayeux and the Cotentin Peninsula or whatever. It's kind of harder to picture this, I think. But you have got these 2 sweeping rivers coming down. You've got the Chindwin, the mighty Chindwin on the kind of western side, running in a sort of north to south way. And then a sort of 100 miles gap is the mighty Irrawaddy, which runs kind of roughly almost directly north-south, then does a 90-degree dogleg to the west Mandalay, pushes on for another sort of 40 miles or so before sort of then turning again. So it's like a sort of giant S bend, but the other way around, a sort of inverted S, sort of heading sort of southwest. And it's there that the Chindwin meets it. And this is that kind of central sort of corridor running roughly in a kind of sort of northeast to southwest kind of direction. And either side of that, you've got hills and jungle and all the rest of it. But if you think of this sort of corridor running down the absolute spine of it's like a sort of inverted Apennines, I suppose, of Italy. That's where you're at. And this is where they are at the moment, and it's a very different kind of fighting to what they were experiencing, in the Arakan, for example, or in the Chin Hills as they were crossing over from India into Burma.
And what it isn't is bamboo and the enemy emerges 10 feet from you in front of you. It's quite different, isn't it? I think that's one of the things to remember about Burma is that there's actually different terrain, which offers different challenges and different solutions. And I think one of the things that's striking here, isn't it, is that the test of a general is when things go badly, when things don't quite go according to plan, and how they then respond and how they then turn that into a victory. And we can see that Slim the year before in 1944. Where actually the Japanese are further into, Mutaguchi's further into his offensive than Slim realises, has got further around him in the summer of 1944.
Come through the back door. And it's interesting because I wonder whether the Kohima operation by the Japanese, that going further north than Slim thinks, I wonder whether that has inspired him with Operation Extended Capital, which is when he realises that he's not going to be able to have a decisive confrontation with the Japanese in the Shuibo Plain, this wide expanse of sort of dusty plainland between the Chindwin and the Irrawaddy. I wonder whether that is one of the things that inspires him to think, well, okay, maybe we should just do a big drop south and get him right behind the Japanese at Mandalay and go to Mictila.
The Japanese have been inspired by the year before's battles anyway, haven't they? That they've been
inspired by the Chindits. So maybe this is the true worth of the Chindits, is that the Chindits have inspired Mutaguchi. Mutaguchi has inspired Slim. And as we discover, he's on the cusp of his greatest victory, all inspired by Orde Wingate. How about that? Or maybe not.
No, I'll take that. I'll take that standing naked eating an onion.
Yeah, all of that. But what I would say, and we'll get onto this a little bit later, is I don't think the Chindit expedition, while you can absolutely argue that the Chindits get carried away in the second Chindit expedition of March 1944, there are definitely lessons learned, values to be had, experience gained, which helps at this current decisive battle which is playing out, albeit battles, I should probably say. Anyway, in the last episode, we were really focusing on 33rd Corps sector. This is Monty Stopford's corps, and this is in the kind of, what they're trying to do is lure the Japanese into thinking this is the main effort. And certainly they've got 3 divisions rather than the 2 they've got in 4th Corps, attacking around north of Mandalay. We've got Pete Reese's 19th Indian Infantry Division and crossing over to the north of Mandalay, about 40 miles north of Mandalay, and now pressing southwards. You've then got about 40 miles away from Mandalay to the west, after the Irrawaddy does its 90-degree dogleg towards the west. You've got 20th Indian Infantry Division, which having quite a sticky time getting across. And then you've got closer, a little bit later, you've got the 2nd British Division rather than the Indian Division, also crossing as well, but only about kind of 15 miles west of Mandalay. So that's where we were on that one. And I think this time it's time to look at the daring right hook deep to the south, which has been carried out by Frank Messervy's 4th Corps. I thought one of the ways to do this would be to look at an American taking part in this, who is Captain Scott Gilmore, who is second in command of A Company of the 4th 8th Gurkhas. He's a New Yorker from a successful publishing family, and he has volunteered to drive ambulances with the American Field Service in 1941 for Americans joined the war, who are in North Africa in support of 8th Army. But with the kind of Battle of Alamein over and 8th Army sort of disappearing off into Libya and beyond and heading towards Tunisia, he decides he needs a different challenge. He gets jaundice as well, so he's hospitalized and then comes out of it and thinks, well, he talks to a guy and the guy says, well, why don't you join the Indian Army? You don't need any citizenship to join the Indian Army. They're not going to worry about the fact that you're American or anything. So he thinks, yeah, all right. So he gets posted to Bombay, now Mumbai, goes to officer training school in Belgaum, and is commissioned in July 1943, and then he's posted to join the Gurkhas. So, obviously, like everyone else, he has to, any white officer in the Gurkhas, he has to learn Gurkhali, and he then serves at the admin box. I think we touched on him maybe in our Burma 44 series. And then he's in the back end of the Kohima battle. And now the 4th 8th Gurkhas are part of 89th Brigade in the 7th Golden Arrow Division, which is the division that's defending the admin box, and spearheading drive south, and they will be spearheading the crossings of the Irrawaddy. Their task now, as they're getting going and trying to do this daring right hook, is to follow the spearhead south and then get across the river, establish a bridgehead, and then once they've done that, punch Cowan's 7th Indian Infantry Division, who will then follow and then make the, do the drive to Miktila itself. It's quite an adventure, isn't it, for an American though? But he wrote a very good memoir. It's very engaging. And, from someone from a Connecticut Yankee in the 8th Gurkha Rifles, I kind of don't think the title's the best. But, for someone who's from a publishing family, he certainly writes very nicely.
It makes its point, though, that, it's so bizarre. Isn't it? It's absolutely bizarre that he might do this. Did he go on having a life of adventure, or did he return to publishing?
No, he goes back to publishing and he lives out his life and stuff. He's a tremendous fellow. He comes across very well. It's sort of very genial, very honest about, when he's absolutely bricking it and when he's not. And he obviously, he's that East Coast American kind of well-to-do, and he likes British stuff, and he likes all the kind of the way they conduct themselves and having tiffin and, nightcaps and all this kind of stuff. And he thinks it's all, moments of terror, but otherwise tremendous fun. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of look at this march of 4th Corps through his eyes, really, was my thinking.
And the 4th, 8th Gurkhas, they've been resting up after because this is a periodic thing, isn't it? Is that a battalion will be, in action and then held back, very often guarding drop zones and stuff when it's not in forward. Yeah, retraining, reconstituting, the malarial casualties will be being sorted out, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so they've been up in the north. They've been in the teak forest and the Chin Hills and everything. And they moved down the Kabul Valley, and they're aiming for Pagan, which is the ancient capital of Burma and a place of, beautiful place of temples and pagodas, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, sort of shimmering out of the plains and all the rest of it on the banks of the Irrawaddy. And they're told that the absolute key thing is that the Japanese don't discover them. Gilmore hears that only one enemy recce plane has ever seen the dust trail of the column, but Kimura's staff, and you remember General Kimura is the commander of the Burma Army Group area, discount the info. All very kind of France 1940, isn't it? With Gamelan discounting the accounts of Germans in the Ardennes. It's not possible.
That must have been quite the journey, though, in trucks all the way down. That's been hard going.
Well, they're not doing it all the way. They travel the first 125 miles by lorry, and then they camp by the Manipur River for a few days. Then the mules catch up, and they march the next 42 miles to the village of Kan. So they're doing this on foot. And this takes 3 days. So it is the Lushai Brigade, who we touched on in the last episode, Slim's own Chindits, sort of irregulars who are drawn from sort of local, who know the land a bit better. So the Lushai Brigade are doing the kind of first foraging. And that is also deliberate because they wanted to look like an irregular force. And this is just sort of reconnaissance and kind of, jitter raids, a bit like the Chindits, really. That's what they're trying to make. If the Japanese come across them, that's what they want it to appear like. But they're also kind of paving a way as well, of course. And then they're being followed by the 28th East African Brigade and the rest of 7th Indian Division then following. So once at Can, the 4th 8th Gurkhas are then ordered to carry out a sweep east and then south through the hill country, which is a 100-mile hook. And the aim is to cut off Japanese troops between Gangor, which is literally due south from Kahlua, which we've mentioned a number of times, which is up in the north, and the river Irrawaddy. And of course, when they set off on this huge sort of sweeping operation, it was absolutely not clear at all how many enemy troops there'd be. They're told that comms are strictly by wireless only and very tightly rationed. And of course, but the problem they have is that any radio comms are tricky because of the ranges involved and the atmospherics and the temperamental radio sets and all the rest of it. So basically, once they're off on this sweep, they're kind of basically on their own. There's this rather lovely news bulletin which they publish with a really nice description of this countryside in which they're travelling through. Do you want to do this one?
The Burma hills in January are cool and fresh, and when in the sunset the hillsides turn to all the greens and browns of an English woodland in autumn. Their beauty is unsurpassed. Between them lie the valleys of paddy stubble, and nearby nestle the villages of picturesque little stilt-raised dwellings. Who can convey on paper the charm of the little pagodas standing in clusters large and small, guarded on their hilltops by the Chintits, and with their tinkling, silver-voiced wind bells that never stay silent? I'll buy a timeshare. I don't know about you, Jim.
Yeah, I'm up for that. It sounds absolutely great, doesn't it? Really, really love it. It's very sort of evocative. And of course, they're all they're desperately trying not to get complacent because every day they're not meeting Japanese and they're sort of getting into this. People like routine and the sort of the daily rituals of what they do. You know, so they're up early, cook's busy with fires covered by screening branches. You know, they then move off when it's still dark. They have 10 minutes rest in every hour. And during the rest, the mules are also briefly unloaded. Then, you know, in addition to 700 riflemen, they also have a platoon of Indian sappers for bridge building and track improvement if necessary, and a battery of mountain artillery. And after 3 hours, they stop for a full half hour. And Gilmore notes in his memoir, he goes, there would be a few minutes to lie back and enjoy the rustle of the breeze in the swaying bamboo, or a stare into the heights of a lone giant teak tree. I mean, it all sounds rather nice, doesn't it? And you see that he's finding it very agreeable. And by 1:30 to 2 o'clock, you know, they'd have done 12 or 15 miles or so. So at that point, they'd have reached an objective, which they would have picked out the previous day's O group, and O's group is orders group. You know, this is where you sort of officers get together and go, right, chance, what are we going to do tomorrow? That kind of thing. And they pick out a drop zone. Once they're there, they would put markers out, and then lo and behold, every single day, without fail, Dakotas would fly over low and slow and shove out Hessian sacks, which is, you know, fodder for the mules, food for themselves, rations, you know, bit of ammunition if they needed it. And Gilmore writes, we came to love the sight of those overworked Dakotas laboring and across the hills. In the fine weather of the Burmese winter, they always found us.
And that's the thing they've learned from the Chindits, really, isn't it? Is how to get the air supply right. Actually, the thing that Orde Wingate's sort of adventures have delivered to 14th Army, isn't it?
Yeah, and at this point, they're not in the plains. They are in the hills, in the jungly bit. They're following the courses of rivers. You know, they're trying not to be seen. When they're walking, they're not creating huge, great dust columns. You know, so it makes it easier to do so. And, you know, every day's the same. You know, the march at dawn, the reaching the objective early afternoon, prep for the airdrop, dig in, repeat, then repeat again. So commanding the 4th 8 Gurkhas, and I'm pleased about this, is Lieutenant Colonel Walter Walker, who is our friend of the show, Annabelle Vennings, a historian herself.
Yeah.
It's her grandfather.
Oh, brilliant.
And she wrote a brilliant book called To War with the Walkers, which was all about her grandparents and uncles and all the rest of it, and all the amazing war they went through. And they were very much sort of Indian Army stock. Anyway, Walter Walker is very experienced. He's imperturbable. He's an absolute stickler for appearance and turnout, you know, shaving every day. But Gilmore really likes him. He says he's first class at his job, demanding yet efficient, cool yet precise. He never showed fear nor worry. And, you know, that's the sort of person you want. I mean, you can just imagine exactly what he's like. He's got the moustache. He's got the slick back hair. He's sort of compassionate for the men, but aloof. You know, the right balance, you know.
Holland, are your mules in order? I do hope so, boy.
They are so, yes. I think they're all in frightfully good fettle.
Jolly good.
Jolly good. Carry on. And do pop by to my tent later on for a touch of scotch. Anyway, they move deeper into Burma. On the 7th day of March, which is the 24th of January, they reach and block the main track from Gangor to Pakoku, which is on the Irrawaddy. Pakoku is the kind of crossing point they've originally kind of aimed for. They're thinking, you know, they're going to make the final decision when they get there, but that's what they're thinking. And this is a few miles north of Pagan, and it's right on the Irrawaddy. And they reached that 2 days ahead of schedule. So they're doing really well. And one of the reasons they were so ahead of schedule is because they're not finding any Japanese. And so they then push on to Sinta. And here they stay for a week, patrolling far and wide, and they find no enemy at all. So it looks like this has worked.
What a relief that must be, though. Like, you're going out in the patrol in the jungle and there's no one there. That must, you know. And
they've also prepared the airfield. They've the newly constructed airfield at Sinta. So again, this is all part of it. This sort of going 50 miles, creating another airfield so you can bring up more supplies. You know, it's all leapfrogging stuff. And Slim comes down to meet them, and he meets just them. You know, he meets the 4th 8 Gurkhas and no one else. And they're absolutely pleased as punch that their chief is coming around and seeing them face to face. And he talks to all the officers and to all the men. And Gilmore is really impressed because Slim just chats amiably to all the Gurkhas in fluent Gurkhali. You know, quite casually, total pro. And then on the 10th and the 11th, overnight on the 10th and 11th of February, they march overnight from Sinta to Mayichi on the banks of the Irrawaddy. And, you know, and obviously it's at night to avoid detection. And they're now at last out of the hills and the jungle and into the open, undulating plains of the mighty river. Miichi is a tree-lined village on the bank, so the trees also help camouflage what they're doing, and they decide to cross here, not at Pakoku. So although the 28th East African Division has been leading the way with the Lushai Brigade, now it is their turn to cross the Irrawaddy. And the 4th 8 Gurkhas have now travelled 450 miles since first leaving Kohima, half of which they've done on foot. And in that time, they've not met a single Japanese soldier.
That's incredible.
It is absolutely incredible. And from where they are in Miachi on the far side, Gilmore can see the ancient Burmese capital of Pagan. He says, the Irrawaddy was wide, sliding silently past, blue and silver in the sun. And it's all sort of image of it all seems very tranquil, doesn't it? And peaceful and calm. And, it is an incredible feat that they've got to where they've got to. And obviously, they haven't been held up by that Japanese. But one of the reasons they haven't been held up with the Japanese is because the deception has worked. And that's a huge credit to all the higher minds up at corps level and army level. But it is also, and it has to be said, an incredible feat of engineering and of endurance to get to where they got to. I mean, the fact that the Japanese don't realize what's going on is extraordinary. Now, it has to be admitted that Japanese intelligence is really, really bad. It is a logistical miracle.
It's not a thing they'd ever be able to do, so they don't consider it a possibility.
Yep.
Yeah. Your imagination about what the enemy might be achieved is limited by what you imagine you can achieve.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Japanese are particularly guilty of looking at things through the prism of their own experience and understanding. I think that's constantly affected them in the same way that it did, we've said this a lot about Hitler. It's one of Hitler's problems. He always looks at the world through his own narrow worldview, and that is problematic. But of course, they've now got to cross the mighty Irrawaddy and establish a bridgehead and then get to and capture Mictila. So, there's still a massive challenge. And one of the big problems about going this far south is the further south you go, the wider the Irrawaddy becomes. And it's vast. On the plus side, it is now the perfect time to cross because, it is before the start of the monsoon, but it's getting on to being, the monsoon's not that far away, so water levels are lower, about 40 foot lower than they would be at the height of the monsoon, for example. The flip side again of that is it's so low that there's now lots of sandbars everywhere, which have to be negotiated. And it's very, very hard to map because every single year these sandbars shift, as does the kind of precise course of the Irrawaddy.
However it may appear now, once the monsoon starts, it will all change again anyway. That's an enormous engineering challenge, isn't it? Because whatever you're betting on now in a couple of months might all be gone.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, 114th Brigade of the 7th Indian Division have been fighting a battle at Perkoku, which is the original part where they were thinking they were going to cross, hoping to persuade the Japanese that this is just a minor outflanking operation where they might cross, but nothing more. It's not conceived to be for the Japanese to consider a kind of a major outflanking incursion. But while this is going on, this also distracts the Japanese from what else is going on, which is, 3 different courses of which, the 4th 8th Gurkha is one of the routes. And 4th Corps now plans the operation into 4 phases. So the first crossing is going to be on the night of the 13th, 14th of February in silence with landfall near a place called Nyungu. And 4 beaches have been earmarked. And either side of these beaches, there are sort of exit points. But there are then really quite high cliffs, 500-foot high cliffs. They're quite substantial on the other side. And what you've got is similar, which is not dissimilar, rather, to Omaha Beach, in that you've got these bluffs, but you've got these draws, the Colville draw, the Verville draw. It's kind of the same sort of thing. So there are these beaches where cliffs suddenly drop off into a kind of little valley running down to the mighty river. And that's where you want to land and work your way up these valleys and then onto the top of the cliffs. That's the idea. So Nyungu is 3 miles upstream from Pagan and downstream from Perkoku. And then the battalions of the 33rd Brigade and some tanks would be ferried over. They would then make a rapid advance to take Nyungu, which is the largest settlement closest to the river. And then having taken Nyungu, the rest of 17th Infantry Division would then do a rapid drive to Mictila. That is the plan. So at dawn on the 14th of February 1945, Scott Gilmore is waiting with the men to cross, and recce planes have been limited so as not to arouse suspicion. So they're all a bit unsure of what enemy lie on the other side or what the opposition might be. And obviously this is pretty nerve-wracking stuff. You're sitting there waiting to go. And the crossings here are to be the longest river crossing of any troops in any theatre at any point in the Second World War. And they're as wide as 2,000 feet. They're well over a mile. And one of the problems is that when you're crossing, because of the flow of the river and the flimsiness of the boats, you're not talking going straight across. You're going with the tide. So you're doing a diagonal crossing, which of course then makes it even wider. And Gilmore understands that the crossings have started when he hears sudden gunfire, and he knows the guns are theirs, and that suggests that they're meeting opposition, so they will no longer be able to get across unobserved, and that gives you even more of a kind of sickening feeling in your stomach.
And particularly after all this time where they haven't fought the Japanese.
No, right. So you're sort of a bit out of practice.
Yeah. Your nerves maybe sort of, there's more anticipation. You're not in the sort of weariness of dealing with it on a daily basis, are you? And that's the lead battalion of 2nd South Lancs of 114th Brigade. And they've been chosen for this job because they landed on Madagascar back in May 1942. Quite extraordinary. An ironclad. Basically being treated as, you've done an amphibious landing. Here you go. And they were going to send a company across under cover of darkness and then land and secure the headland on the cliffs. But of course, no plane survives contact with a river. River crossings involve noisy engines. I mean, when we were talking about the Rhine crossing, weren't we? Buses, dust fits.
And also, don't forget that these boats have all been made, up river, have to be transported south, and they're all kind of made on the hoof. So lots of them leak. Hardly surprising, is it? Dawn arrives before the South Lancs have landed, and suddenly they come under mortar fire and rifle and MG fire. 2 company commanders are killed in action in the process, and boats are sinking. But some do get through, and they're very quickly followed by the 4th, 15th Punjabis. And when they cross, there's no enemy fire whatsoever. And it later turns out the firing on the South Lancashires came from only a chance Japanese patrol, who, once they realised what was going on, have scarpered and hurried off. So it feels like there's more enemy than there actually were. Anyway, Gilmore and the rest of the 4th 8 Gurkhas, they cross that same afternoon, some Valentine's Day. And of course, the boats are drifting diagonally as they make the journey, and they reach the cliffs and, they get off. They think, crikey, they're pretty high. But the draws off the beach are, they do give you quite an easy exit. They're opposed by another chance patrol and also by GIFs. These, do you remember GIFs from the INA, what the Indian National Army are known as? And a force of 160, which could be problematic, but in fact, they promptly surrender. And they also say, there's hardly any Japanese around here. And, oh, by the way, here's the best route to the top of the cliff. So they're actually quite helpful. And they're, having properly surrendered.
It is interesting, though. I mean, the fact that, when the South Lancs cross, the fire is from just a patrol. It just shows you how fragile these sort of landings are, how everything's delicate and everything is predicated on luck, people staying cool, good judgment, all those things that if a patrol can disrupt this kind of landing that's this important, you've got to take it all very, very seriously, haven't you? By the next morning, 4th 8th Gurkhas have moved 3 miles inland, haven't they?
Yeah, they've made it. Your bottom line is 7th Indian Division is across. They've got their 3 miles. They're holding that prominent ridge 500 feet high. Their target, their personal target is to get a monastery with a pagoda next to it perched on top, which is seen as a sort of crucial landmark and an obvious aiming point when you're getting across the river. And a bit further to the south is one of those sort of gaps in the cliff. So that makes sense. You can expand that trackway for tanks and all the rest of it. And Gilmore was ordered to take a company to take the pagoda and hold it and deny it to the enemy, but there aren't any enemy. He says, the summit greeted us with nothing more than lethal gusts of cooling wind coming over the crest from the east. Phew, thank goodness.
Surprise has been total, but it's more than total surprise, isn't it? Because the Japanese don't seem to even know about it.
Well, of which more later on in this episode, because it's just extraordinary. And it means that they can expand the bridgehead up to the beautiful ancient Burmese capital of Pagan, which they do in very quick order. And Mesafee knows that speed is of the essence here. He's a thruster. We know this. This is his whole point is to get to Mktila as quickly as possible before the Japanese can react. It is not very far removed from Guderian's get to the Mersey 3 and cross in 4. It's this kind of thing. Get there before you unsettle the enemy before they have a chance to react. So he just doesn't wait for 7th Indian Division to finish consolidating the bridgehead. He just goes, right, go on, 17th Infantry Division under Punchcan, get across and get going. So 17th Division start crossing on the night of the 17th of February. So it's only 3 days after the start of the crossings.
Incredible.
And they finally meet some heavy Japanese resistance from troops that are dug into extensive tunnels around the town of Nyungu. You remember that was the kind of, get to Nyungu, take Nyungu, then get to Mktila. So air power is brought in, again, underlying the crucial, vital importance. And they hammer these positions with rockets, bombs and napalm. But the enemy is not for shifting. And instead, the sappers brought up charges and they just seal up the enemy bunkers and tunnels and with the troops in alive.
Crikey.
Ruthless. We haven't got time for this nonsense. If you're not going to surrender, that's what happens.
Yeah. And then the town surrenders without a fight, doesn't it?
Nyangu, that they overrun that pretty quickly, yeah. And Slim is on the scene. He wants to see it himself, and he gets to Pagan, and he says, "It's 1,200 temples, madder red or ghostly white, rise some like fantastic pyramids or turreted fairy castle, others in tapering pagoda spires, from the sage green mass of trees against the changing pastel blues, reds and golds of sunrise. As the foreground flows the still dark yet living sweep of moving water." There's no question, is it, that Fourth Course sweep, their big right hook, is getting the descriptive writer to come to the fore, I think, in this. They're mesmerised by the beauty of this.
I still think in his adopted Brummy it's better, but there we are. I mean, that's people like to say that Shakespeare talked like this as well, don't they? But it'll go with it.
Exactly. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. To be or not to be?
Not to be.
That's the question. Oh, Romeo, wherefore art thou? So anyway, between the 18th and the 21st of February, the rear guard of 17th Division and the all-important 255th Tank Brigade are also ferried across the river. Tanks have always been the key part of the plan. And don't forget, it was Frank Messervy proving, before he took over 7th Indian Division, that tanks, medium tanks, 30-ton tanks could operate in Burma. That is why they're using them in such abundance at this stage. Anyway, the advance on Muktila, which is 80 miles from the bridgehead, then begins on the 21st of February. And most of 17th Division are aiming for the twin towns initially of Kamye and Saiktain. And so at this point, Punch Cowan, commander of 17th Division, now splits his division into two. So 63rd Infantry Brigade is given 5th Probin's Horse in one column, and 48th Brigade and the 9th Royal Deccan Horse is given the other. And leading the charge, though, is a sort of ad hoc force called Tom Cole, which is a sort of rapid recce force with some sort of armoured cars and whatnot, and carriers, etc., who are told to sort of surge forward and reconnoitre routes.
They're using Stuarts and stuff, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, yes, exactly that, yeah.
Stuarts proved their worth in the retreat from Burma in 42, that they do a really, really, really great job.
Yeah, they beetle around, they're quick and manoeuvrable.
Yeah, very well suited to the jungle. They're less likely to get bogged. And then 63rd Brigade, who are in the lead, they quickly roll up the Japanese, and they speed on towards Wellong.
They roll up the opposition at Oyen, where they do have quite a tough fight. They kill several hundred Japanese, as you say, then speed on to Wellong. And
then they take Tong Tha, which is roughly halfway to Muktila. So this is on the 24th of February. I mean, they're making incredible progress, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are.
As we just touched on that there is armour in the retreat from Burma in 1942, and then there is an attempt to use armour in the Arakan offensive, but in penny packets. One of the things Slim has learned and knows is that you've got to use armour decisively and in mass for it to work. There's no point using up tanks in 2s and 3s as they do so disastrously, as Noel Owen does in the Arakan offensive in 43 rather. It's that learning. Slim grasped the fundamentals of this combined arms warfare and has the imagination to change his plan when his plan doesn't work out the way it ought to. I mean, these are all the ingredients of absolute military genius, right?
Yeah. Messervy's bought into it. Punch Cowan's bought into it. Pete Reese has bought into it. Gracie of 20th Division has bought into it. They all get this. They understand what they need to do. And it's amazing the speed with which they're operating on this very much, effectively a battle group. What we're talking about here is a Kampfgruppe. Let's not kid ourselves. This has got artillery, it's got reconnaissance troops, it's got tanks, it's got infantry, it's all motorized, for the most part it's motorized. They know what they're doing. And so they take Karlang on the 25th of February, and the next day, the 26th of February, they take the crucial airstrip at Thabat Con, which is only about 15 miles to the west of Muktila. So they're almost there. And this means that another part of the plan can get underway, which is flying in 99th Brigade, which is the 3rd Brigade of 17th Division. So, the idea was to sort of get across the Irrawaddy with 2 brigades only rather than 3 that you would normally have in a division, and then fly in the 3rd one. And this is what they've been doing. They've been waiting in Palal, which is on the Imphal Plain, to be flown in the moment it's captured. And it's all just going absolutely according to plan. They arrive on the 26th of February. There's still a bit of small arms fire around, but they add crucial extra strength and weight just when it's needed. And of course, the Japanese are still fighting to the death with plenty of banzai charges whenever they come across them. But what they are noticing, what the 4 Corps troops are noticing, is that the fighting skills and tactics seem well below par from what they've experienced earlier. And of course, this is exactly as you'd expect, because the training's not as good, it's not complete, they've got less supplies, and they're being degraded. They're out of time in the same way that the Germans have been, degraded. It's just not the same. Japanese way of dealing with a tank is to send someone out, strapped with a box of explosives attached to their chest and just lie in front of it.
Oh, Christ.
Blow themselves up and the tank. And later by nightfall on the 26th of February, having, flown in 99th Brigade and having got this airfield at Thabat Khan, they're now 8 miles only from Mktila. 63 Brigade at that point becomes very deeply ensnarled in bitter fighting. But, suddenly it's more like the Desert War. It's sort of open plains, it's dusty, it's dry wadis and whatever. But here the armour is really, really decisive. You've got Cowan heading for the airstrip, and Mesavie had been leading the rest of the corps into Mktila itself. And Slim writes,
"The Japanese had no experience of these massed armoured attacks and seemed quite incapable of dealing with them."
But clearly, there's no way the Japanese are going to be giving up Mktila without a fight. And we'll be coming back to that in the second half.
We'll see you in a tick.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtuo Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your Virtuo Pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back. In Disney's Freakier Friday.
Yes, totally. Yes.
On August 8th.
We switched bodies. I didn't want to be a part of this family, and now I'm part of some dodgy family curse, and I'm the eldest.
The ultimate movie event of the summer arrives.
I think I just peed a little.
Disney's Freakier Friday. In theaters August 8th. Get tickets now.
Oh, this is cool. Let's do it.
Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
Today's top story. The flavor merger of the century between the Peanut Butter Group and Chocolatey Corp. Joining me is a PBC executive.
Thanks for having me, Barry.
Now, how did you know the merger and the byproduct of it, Jif peanut butter and chocolate flavored spread, would be a success?
It was a gut feeling, a rumbling, if you will. Besides, they're two titans of taste.
Very true. Goes great with pretzels.
And pancakes.
Apples too, I bet. Try Jif PBC today.
Welcome back to Weird Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And we're 8 miles from Mktila. Armour is rolling forward. And of course, tanks are very, very effective when the other side doesn't have an answer to them.
And when you've got air power supporting you as well.
Yeah, and there's no one getting their top trumps out and going, well, the armour's inadequate because they haven't got an answer to it. Right, so now, of course, a crucial part of Slim's plan is that the Japanese need to, up to this point, have been glued in position by 33 Corps to the north. That's what this whole thing relies on, right, Jim? So what's going on there?
Well, it's just a juggling act. He's got to send over enough to keep the bulk of the Japanese 15th Army around Mandalay. And that's the key thing. And, Mktila, the balance of these two twin operations over the distances and the logistical challenges of getting across the river and all the rest of it have to be quite carefully timed. And we remember we talked about Moniwa and the 20th Division attacking there and having, this is sort of very close to where the Chindits joins the Irrawaddy, having quite a tough fight there. Slim gets there on the 8th of February. And this is a town that he'd vacated back in May 1942 when he's retreating back across the Irrawaddy. 20th Division start crossing the river on the 12th of February, but they're going to take 3 weeks for the whole of the division to establish a firm bridgehead. Because General Gracie has sent his division across at the very junction of the Japanese 31st and 33 divisions. But this second crossing after 19th Division, Pete Reese's 19th Division north of Mandalay, prompts a ferocious response. And I should just remind people, this is about 40 miles or so due west of Mandalay, after the Dogleg and the Irrawaddy. And what he does is he sends both divisions. Katamura sends both divisions and remaining Japanese tank regiment in Burma to meet this attack by Gracie's 20th Division. And once again, Gracie owes a huge debt to the air forces, which are such a massive force enhancer, because number 221 RAF group hammers the Jap armor. when they try and counterattack, and Hari bombers knock out 13 tanks in one day. I don't know what it is about knocking 13 tanks out in one day. That's the same number that the Sherwood Rangers knocked out on the Roy Ridge. but obviously, this goes from your point, tanks are obviously an easy target in open territory with no cover of their own and with no answer. The key thing about this is it doesn't really matter that 20th Division's crossings are taking such a long time. In fact, actually, it's a good thing, because what they're doing is they're drawing troops, not only keeping them away from McTeela, they're also drawing them away from Mandalay. So at one point, 2 battalions from the Japanese 33rd Division lose 953 men out of 1,200 in a suicide assault against the 20th Division's bridgehead. And between the 21st and the 26th of February, 500 Japanese bodies are buried by bulldozer, just in that time alone. So 20th Division are having a sticky time of it, but actually this is perfect for Slim.
But Jim, what's this reminding you of? What it's reminding me of is, let's say what we're going to do is draw the Germans in on our left flank around Caen, around a major crossing and an important nodal point, and you're going to draw them in, and you're going to get them to stick to you, and then you swing round on your right flank, on their left flank, and envelop them.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about that so much about Normandy, where the idea is all the armor's up one end, all the German heavy metal, the German focus is on one end. And yes, they're fighting at the other end, but that's the point. They're concentrating on their main effort because they fear, after all, because it's a valid fear in Normandy. If the British break out on the eastern end of the Normandy lodgement, it's curtains for the Germans.
Yeah.
If Slim gets into Mandalay properly, it's curtains for the Japanese here. So you can completely understand why they might get sucked into fighting this battle. And if it goes slowly and it draws them in longer, great.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. There are now really clear signs that General Kimura, a reminder, he's the total Burma Army Area commander, Japanese commander, has been totally duped by this.
Yeah.
What it means is the battle is now raging as Kimura had expected, with an assault from the north or Mandalay, assault from the west, and he thinks that's what it's going to be. He also knows that the US-led NCAC forces, and remember those Northern Combat Area Command forces, Chinese and American and British, of course, as well, 36th Division, are advancing from Myitkyina. And Kimura is expecting those to merge with 14th Army and then to attack Mandalay together. That's what he's trying to second guess as Allied intentions.
Well, and he hasn't got enough to deal with everything if and when it all happens at once, right?
Yeah, exactly. But what is really interesting is that his decision to pull back across Irrawaddy and not have a decisive engagement on the Schwiebert Plain actually dovetails with orders from Imperial General Headquarters that now considered protecting the overland route from Burma into China of secondary strategic importance to that of protecting southern Burma and Rangoon. So clearly, it's understandable that he's going to consider the defense of Mandalay critical to fulfill this. And this goes back to Slim's misreading of it in the back end of 1944, because he's assuming that the Japanese are never going to surrender and all the rest of it. But actually, their strategic picture has changed dramatically. So the 2nd Division then is the last of Stopford's divisions to cross, and they do so on the night of the 24th, 25th of February at Nagazoon. And it's the 7th Worcester. So you've had Pete Reese's 19th Division crossing at the north. You've had 20th Division crossing 40 miles to the west. And now you've got 2nd Division crossing about 15 miles or so west of Mandalay. And it's the 7th Worcesters, and they have really bad luck because they have 17 boats filling with water or being sunk by enemy fire. And by midnight, they're back on the bank where they started. And it looks like the whole thing might fail completely. But then the Cameron Highlanders make a small bridgehead, and then so too do the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. But, there's a point where Slim's really worried about this. And on the far side, the Japanese are retaliating with fury. But after realizing that the main beachhead is going to be a flop, Brigadier West of the 5th Brigade of the 2nd British Division orders the Dorsets to shift 5,000 yards and so help the Camerons open a bridgehead. And this opens a chink that can then be exploited. And 6th Brigade get across way more easily. And by the 26th of February, the entire division is across, plus tanks, and they're able to move eastwards towards Mandalay. So what looks very sticky on the night of the 25th, 2 days later is it's all happened again. And this means, of course, that by the end of February, all 3 divisions of 33 Corps have successfully got across the mighty Irrawaddy. And so too, by this stage, of course, have 4th Corps, further to the southwest. So these are huge achievements in their own right. Just forget about the enemy. Just getting across is difficult. And, of course, most of them have been opposed in some way.
Well, and of course, you're looking at tons of planning, the logistic effort, but also at the same time, an ability to improvise. I mean, this is the other thing. When you say, oh, well, all right, we'll land 5,000 yards in a different direction. That flexibility, you can't really imagine that happening at Vassal in Varsity, in Plunder Varsity, can you? You can't really see 21st Army Group being able to go, well, maybe we'll land somewhere else, can you?
No.
And Slim, after all, and he talks about this after the war. It's all improvised, and you make do and mend, and he says it's been done with a couple of bamboos and a bootlace. It's an exaggeration because we have talked about an awful lot of Bailey bridging, which after all is quite the opposite of that. But I mean, it's truly incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, really, really, it really is.
These rivers make European rivers look piddling, don't they? Literally.
Like a sort of gentle village brook. But it's absolutely clear by the beginning of March that Slim's great gamble is working. He's 33 across. The Japanese have flung most of their men against these crossings, but of course in piecemeal fashion. They're retreated and ground down. And it reminds me of just in the same way that, as it did you a little bit, how the panzer divisions arriving in Normandy have been ground down by Conde. They're being pushed into a fight in penny packets rather than en masse. And that's why the divisions facing them, whether it be 20th Division or 19th Division or indeed 2nd Division, have been able to defeat them, and see off these attacks. 2nd Division is pushing east towards Mandalay. 20th is sweeping south and then northeast in a big loop. And 19th Division is pushing down from the north. So Mandalay is in danger of being caught, if you're Japanese, in a massive pincer. And really, there's only one thing for Katamura, who is the 15th Army commander, to do, and that's pull 15th Army back, and very hurriedly too. But, he's completely falling for Slim's ploy, and frankly, annihilation beckons. But, meanwhile, a tough fight is also playing out at Mictila, of course.
Yeah. So General Tanaka, who's Kimura's chief of staff, holds a staff conference at Mictila on the 23rd of March.
Yeah, just amazing. You think while all this other stuff is going on, while the Allies are sort of 25 miles away, they are having this staff conference at Mictila, blissfully unaware of any issue whatsoever. No idea this is going on.
But they accept that Mandalay is basically blocked on all sides and under siege, invested, and so they're going to reinforce 15th Army with 18th Division and 17th Independent Mixed Brigade, and then launch a counteroffensive.
Over the Irrawaddy back onto the West Bank.
You've got to admire their optimism.
Yeah. And they're going to do this on the 10th of March. I mean, it is absolutely bonkers. At the time of this, they have no idea about Fourth Corps.
How not, though? I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah. This is going on while Punchcann's division is 3 days away. I mean, and it's amazing because, the Oyen battle, which I said, was quite a stiff fight, taking place on the 22nd of March. How come the Japanese troops weren't signaling this and saying, oh, my God, boss, we've got quite a lot of enemy to deal with? And it's maybe because they just don't have any radios.
Well, maybe also if you're fighting to the last man, information does not get out of...
Good point. Hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that's a really fair point. Yeah, they're all dead. All dead and a handful captured. How are you going to do it?
A recurrent problem. There's no one thinking, right, I better jump on a motorbike and get back to let people know what's going on.
Yeah. In fact, actually, it's only 3 hours after the conference ends that an urgent signal arrives into Mictila, which says, the enemy at Pakoku has crossed the river and entered Taunta. The force at Taunta is estimated at 80 men in vehicles led by 2 tanks. And early the next day, the 24th of March, saying enemy at Taunta appears to be moving towards Marlang. 4 tanks in front, 20 trunks, about 300 men. But what is really worrying is the man who's making the decisions now in Mictila is a Japanese civilian, a Gunzoku, who is a civilian administrator. And he's called Shigemitsu Yoshichi. And he realized that Mictila has very, very few defenses. In fact, actually, it's got 2 airfield battalions, 36 field anti-aircraft battalion, and about 4,000 combat troops, but of dubious quality.
Yeah.
And that's because Mictila is a hub. It's stores and supplies and hospital and lines of communication officers and troops. I mean, it's not a fortress. It's an administrative area.
Yeah, I think it's incredible, though. When Yoshichi speaks to one officer, the reply is, isn't there some mistake? How can the enemy be so close in these back areas?
Well, yeah.
And even then, they still don't believe any of it, do they?
No.
So 53rd Division have reported a figure of 2,000 enemy vehicles, but that hasn't got to McTeela. And then Tanaka notes in his diary, that figure's far too high.
Tanaka's chief of staff to Kimura.
Yeah, but again, it's this thing of you don't believe it because it can't be true because you know, how's that possible? Rather than thinking, right, actually, surely judging by the kicking they had the year before, this is all possible, right?
Well, you'd have thought so. And what's really interesting is the signal that comes from 53rd Division to Burma Area Command, it takes them a day to process that signal. Yeah, it doesn't say a lot for the staff, does it?
No, the staff work's not up to much, old boy.
But it's enough to make them realise that they do need to reinforce McTeela and quickly. So Major General Kusaya, and I haven't got his first name, is commanding the number 2 Field Transport Regiment, is told to take command of the town. So it isn't until the 27th of March that Katamura agrees to throw everything at the defence, and he then informs Kimura's headquarters of his plans. And the reply was, enemy in McTeela area not to be overestimated. Keep to your objective of the battle for the Irrawaddy shore. So Katamura then wires back, McTeela situation transformed. Whether this is merely local disturbance or battlefield will in the end be known by facts. Army cannot treat present situation as local disturbance. You know, Kimura could have hurriedly sent the 49th Division, which is in reserve, but he doesn't. And there's clear the sort of mutual distrust between Kimura and Katamura. You know, there had been flaps before, such as when the 1943 Chindit exhibition was launched. But anyway,
Orde Wingate coming to the rescue.
Yeah, there you are. It's all back to Wingate.
See, it's worked.
We need to, you know, realign our feelings on him. But anyway, Kimura goes ahead and sends a main body of 15th Army's artillery and an infantry force from 18th Division and one regiment of 33rd and 15th Divisions. Although all these units are by now very badly under strength, the counterattack is going to begin at McTeela on the 10th of March. And at Mandalay, the troops are then supposed to go on the defensive. But clearly, this is all massively too little, too late.
And whatever he's doing, he's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Exactly that.
Whatever advantage he delivers in one place will disadvantage another.
Yeah, and Katamura knows that this means that Mandalay's probably lost, but he knew that anyway. But he reckons the McTeela crisis is the greater threat because it's their main hub and administrative area, but it's also closer to Rangoon. And protecting southern Burma is the absolute number one key now.
Yeah. Now, McTeela's quite defendable, though, right? That's the thing.
Beautiful town, you know, it's elegant red brick buildings, it's tree-lined avenues and villas, and it's got these 2 lakes. It's got the Northern Lake and the Southern Lake, basically cover the whole of the kind of sort of western side of the town. That makes them quite a good place to defend if you're being attacked from the west, because you've got this waterway through, and you've got these lakes, so there's a kind of sort of causeway between the 2 lakes, which is raised. But obviously that's a problem, but if you're attacking, because that means you're being canalized, so, you know, that's no good. And Slim is absolutely desperate to take McTeela quickly, as is Messavi. And then with Mandalay weakened, smash the Japanese there. So Punch Cowan comes up with a plan, which is to encircle the town. So 48th Brigade attack from the north, while the 255th Tank Brigade, plus 2 infantry battalions, sweep in a wide loop to the north and attack from the east, from a little kind of village called Torma. And at the same time, 63rd Brigade are cutting the railway line running west from the town. And they managed to do this on the 1st of March and then sweep on south to block the road running from the southwest into the town. And they've achieved this by the 2nd of March. So the town is effectively surrounded by the 1st of March. And Cowan then lays down a kind of very heavy bombardment and artillery barrage before sending in the tanks and the infantry. And Slim, again, is there to watch the battle. He's kind of everywhere at the moment. However, the RF refuse to take him in because they think it's an unnecessary, foolhardy mission. So he then taps up the Americans, and they're happy to do so, and they do. So he is there. And Cowan's attack is resisted by, you know, pretty stubborn defense. The Japanese are once again in sort of supporting bunkers and fortified houses. And despite their poor training, their defense is fanatical as, you know, it's ever been. And there's snipers concealed everywhere, and you know, they're picking off the infantry as they're attacking, you know, the Allied infantry. So progress is pretty slow, and it's only by dusk on the 1st of March that troops are finally entering the rubble-strewn streets at the edge of the town.
As the battle continues in the town, because obviously if the Japanese are going to fight to the last round, you've got to clear them out of every house, every bunker, every position imaginable. Unfortunately, there's armour for that. So you can bunker busting, which is how tanks sort of come to prominence the previous year. So that this methodical house by house clearing of the town. And the Japanese, of course, have booby-trapped everything. Everything's a strong port. Every water channel has a hidden bunker. Every ruined building has a sniper. But, I mean, will to fight is one thing. A methodical and better armed and better equipped enemy who's also given you the jump is another thing, right?
You're surrounded, so you're stuck. You're going to be running out of ammunition, aren't you? It's only, you're only going to hold out for so long. And as we know, they're undersupplied anyway. Even though this is a base, even so, it's mainly kind of sort of food and supplies rather than bullets and mortar rounds. And, at times the Japanese are using their 75mm guns and machine guns to engage tanks and infantry, literally at point blank range. But one by one, each of these strong points is methodically and systematically taken out. So that by 6 p.m. on the 3rd of March, the fighting for the town ends when the last 50 Japanese troops in the center of the city make a mass suicide charge to the lake and then drown themselves. I mean, God.
Any crocodiles?
I don't think so. No, history doesn't relate. Crikey, eaten by a crocodile or drown yourself. I mean, it's still pretty grim, isn't it?
I mean, it's amazing this, because it's not even a month since they got across the river.
No, it's half a month. Well, it's a little over, say, 3 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just incredible. Around the town, so they take the centre of the town, and then there's more fighting, but the fighting's essentially for Mictine is basically over by the 5th of March. The official body count is 2,000 enemy dead and 47 prisoners of war. But there's actually many more, because they're buried in bunkers and they're dead in dugouts and all that sort of stuff, and tunnels and stuff, and in the ruins. And obviously the bodies keep popping up in the lake. I mean, Slim himself, this is absolutely amazing. He counts 876 Japanese dead in a small area of 200 by 100 yards. I mean, that's not dissimilar to, Eisenhower at Falaise saying you could walk on the dead for hundreds of yards.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, it's a great victory for Slim, but and for Messavi and indeed for Punch Cowan. But of course, the 4th Corps men are now finding themselves besieged as the enemy forces are finally arriving. So, the battle for Mictila is not over yet. And meanwhile, there's the battle for Mandalay. So late on the 7th of March, Pete Reese's men are now in Powhatan. Remember Pete Reese and the 19th Brigade and 19th Division, rather, and John Masters. So they're only 5 miles north of the city. And General Katamura, the general officer commanding 15th Army, gives a simple order to the defenders in the city. You've got to defend it to the death. Commanding the defense of Mandalay was the Japanese 33rd Division, which is newly commanded by Major General Sai Yamamoto, who's former Chief of Staff of 33rd Army. And he's not quite so committed for everyone getting killed as some of his superiors. So he says, fighting to the last man is, from the point of view of command, the very worst option. Oh, I mean, yes, of course. So he replies to Katamura asking what exactly the order means. And signal back literally what it says. So Yamamoto sort of thinks, okay, well, I'm going to have to do it then. So he signals back, all right, leave it to us. Very well. And he's so incensed, he writes a poem in a rather poor translation, reads as, for their sovereign, our warriors will fall, defending to the end this town of Mandalay. Do you remember all the kamikazes going around writing poems, aren't they?
Yeah. It's all revolting, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's an absolutely insane order from Katamura. It goes in the face of what Kimura's saying, because Kimura, the Burma Army Area Commander, says, strategically, I never considered Mandalay worth any serious defense. The only reason it was held at all was for its prestige value. Like, okay, well, now you're ordering, all the defenders to die. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But, we were looking at Pete Reese's march south in the last episode, which wasn't exactly against orders, but it was very much on his own initiative. And now at this point, he's really commanding with, tremendous verve, but he pushes hard when there's sign of enemy weakness, and he's more cautious when there's stiff resistance. But he's certainly not afraid to push the men. And John Masters records this extraordinary conversation that Reese has on the 6th of March with one of his brigadiers. Do you want to do Reese and I'll do the brigadier?
Well done. You are doing marvels. Press on at once. Keep pressing on. Over.
The men are exhausted, out on their feet. Half their vehicles need maintenance and repair. We'll push on at first light, sir.
You've done very well indeed. Keep up the pressure. Over.
But the men are exhausted, sir.
I said keep up the pressure. Do not harbour or stop at all. Keep advancing all night. Every day we stop to rest and collect ourselves now means a week's more fighting later on. Over.
Yes, but sir, I don't think we can do it. Over.
You can do it. Who's winning this war? Out.
Yes. And after he's put down the kind of, the radio, Reese turns to John Masters and says,
"We've all got to be driven sometimes, Jack. He's cursing me and thinks I don't know what it's like out there. But I do. I also know what it'll be like for them tomorrow and the next week and the week after if they do not conquer themselves now."
And you know what this reminds me of? Oberst Herman Balk crossing the River Meuse and getting to that hill. Fail tonight, what will cost rivers of blood tomorrow. It's the same thing. It's amazing insight, though, isn't it? I'm a bit of a fan of Pete Reese, I've got to say.
But when you're going forwards...
Exploit success.
Yeah, but that attitude's easier to sort of justify, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose so. And they take Medaya halfway to Mandalay. Then a message arrives from Corps ordering all the divisions to hold back one brigade. No more than 20 miles from Chuibo in case of a Japanese counterattack. And this is Corps headquarters and Stopford not understanding what is actually going on at this point. It's clearly ridiculously cautious. But Reese knows he can't ignore this. He's already been sacked once in the desert when he's commanding 10th Indian Division for disobeying a bad order. So he hands over command to Jack Masters and flies off to see Stopford. He's away for 6 hours, but he does persuade Stopford to let him continue. So clearly this is the way to go rather than just taking a unilateral decision. So on the 7th of March, Reese is confident enough to detach an entire brigade to take Maimyo, which is 30 miles to the east and astride the Japanese-held road to Yunnan in China. And initially, Masters argues against this. He thinks it's unnecessary and, reminds him about concentration of force, etc. But then he changes his mind because he suddenly thinks about his Chindit experience. And he thinks, well, actually, if you send 62 Brigade, the commander is also a former Chindit. And he suspects that Japanese resistance would be slight. So they do, and they send them off to do this. And what he's doing actually is going, if you take Maimyo, that's also distracting the Japanese and stopping them from reinforcing Mandalay. It's also increasing the sense that they're being attacked from all corners. They're in disarray. This is their moment of weakness. Exploit this. So, I can see why they do it, but it's quite bold, isn't it? And that day they cover 26 miles in a drive south, and they come up to the edge of the foot of Mandalay Hill, which is bordering the north of the city of Mandalay. And they know that if they take the hill, the city is going to be theirs at some point. They might still have a fight, but it's all over by the fighting. And this hill rises 1,000 feet above the plain and is topped by a multitude of pagodas. And it's absolutely stunning. And it's one of these sort of great scenes of this sort of exotic Far East. People have written kind of whole books about this and been seduced by this. People who've come to Burma from Europe and seen this incredible scene. But under the temples are cellars and storage rooms, and the Japanese hold the entire length of the hill. And there's also other buildings and structures running up the hill to the top where the pagodas and temples are. As Reese and Masters arrive at the front, and they find themselves under constant fire, and the first shell whistles over and lands only 20 feet from Reese and Masters' jeep just after they've arrived. And after dusting themselves off, they hurry to a prostrate man, but he's a mangled mess of flesh and blood and clearly dead. So, they're a fighting frontline general and his chief of staff as well. But it's clear that there's no further advance on Mandalay until Mandalay Hill has been taken. And Reese gives the attack to the 98th Brigade and to the Royal Berkshires. Remember them when they're attacking and they have the guy with the sword jumping onto the tank? But then the commanding officer of the 4th Gurkhas, Lieutenant Colonel Hamish Mackay, comes forward and he says, no, sir, you can't let the Royal Berkshires do it. We must do it, because he's been in the Burma Rifles in the 1930s and knows the place really, really well. And he reckons he knows a route up and reckons he can do it with his Gurkhas. And so Reese goes, splendid, carry on. But again, it's a sign of growing morale, isn't it? That people are volunteering to do what, on paper looks like a pretty horrible job.
Yeah. That night, they take it. Hamish Mackay, with his 4th Gurkhas, sees Mandalay Hill, and it means everything laid out before you. Ain't the palaces of ancient Burmese kings and spacious and beautiful shady trees. It's obviously been smashed up after 3.5 years of war, but there it is, the prize of Mandalay.
Yep.
In 14th Army's grasp.
Yeah.
But the battle isn't over yet. McTeela, fighting continues. Find out what happens in our next episode. As Slim's gambit, will it pay off finally, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, who knows?
The waiting is almost over.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Of course, if you want to get through these without any adverts, then the best way to do that is to go to our Apple Podcast channel and become Officer Class, or subscribe to our Patreon. Our perks include live casts every other Monday, pretty much now. We've decided to put a rocket up ourselves about those, and much, much more. Now, of course, the next episode, Jim, can we offer people a hint, or are we going to just leave them completely in the dark.
Going to return to the siege of Mictila. It's going to play out, and then we're going to see what happens after that, and wrap up the Burma campaign.
Absolutely.
It's still got some twists and turns, of course. It's just an epic, epic battle.
I mean, basically, we're like the Japanese. We're going to die in a ditch with this one. We're going to fight to the last man to tell this story.
Cheerio.
We'll see you soon. Cheerio.